Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Cinema Crusaders. It is Friday afternoon here on the west coast of the United States. It's Friday evening in various parts of the world. It might be even Saturday morning where you are, but wherever you are, we hope that you will enjoy this show. So, the last couple episodes of Cinema Crusaders, we've been doing dystopian science fiction. So we decided to change it up a little bit, and we're going to do some fantasy movies in a row. And we're starting off. The first movie we are going to talk about is a movie from 1982, a movie that I hadn't seen, but there are elements of the movie that are so iconic that a D&D fantasy nerd like me knew about them, even though I had never seen the movie. And I'm sure we'll talk about it. Yeah, there's some stuff in there that I'm sure if you were into D&D fantasy back in the 80s, you knew about some of this stuff, and you might not know where it came from, but it was out there in the zeitgeist. But before we get to talking about this movie, I have to introduce my co-host. First, I want to say, give a shout out to Shade Wing. Some stuff came up. He's not going to be with us today, but hope you're doing well, Shade Wing, and we will talk to you soon. But I do have two of my fellow Cinema Crusaders with me here today. The first one is a filmmaker in his own right. He's also a comic book writer out there. He works with Warehouse 9 Productions and has the Big Book of Bob Volume 1 available through the Anyone World, through ASAP Imagination. He's out there doing all sorts of stuff and preaching the gospel of film. I'm talking about none other than Lance Lucero. How you doing, Lance?
I'm doing good. It's awesome to be here. I can't wait to talk about this flick. This is a fun one.
Yeah, and I think you're going to have some incredible insight about this movie because, I know you love to talk about cinematography and film, and this movie has that in spades. There are some truly beautiful shots in here, so I think we really need to discuss this. It's going to be a little bit different. We talked about more about concepts of our science fiction. I think we're going to really need to break down how this film was made and some stuff because I think that's really the important thing because I think the story is pretty basic. So we can talk a little bit about it. But before we get to that, I need to also introduce a fellow D&D nerd. He's also an artist, a writer. He is involved with Rain Cross Press as well as doing his own work with Mr. Happy and various other titles he's working on in his comic book career. He's ready to take off. And he's also a Cinema Crusader, Sloppy Spoilers podcast, and he reviews stuff for Comic Crusaders. He's a busy man. I'm talking about none other than Jeff Baracey. How you doing, Jeff?
Hello, everybody. It's good to be back and to talk about one of my favorite movies from the 80s, which was the preeminent decade of sword and sorcery fantasy films. Whether they had a big budget or a small budget, I just love darn near everything that comes out of this period of this decade of filmmaking.
And a happy Friday to you back out there, Awesome Sauce Radio, and Adam, who I know is behind.
All right, Adam.
So let's jump right into the depths of this movie. So let's talk a little bit about the plot. And I don't think, like I said, I don't think there's a whole lot to go on here. I think it's a pretty basic plot, so I don't think we need to spend a whole lot of time on it. But the basic plot of this movie is greedy evil king resurrects evil sorcerer to get him more power. And then we have the standard, fantasy trope where he overtakes a kingdom, a son escapes, and he will eventually come back to avenge himself upon those who have done wrong to his family. But he kind of takes the roundabout approach to get there, and he becomes a hero and adventurer in his own right. I think Jeff summed it up best online when he said, this is more sword and sorcery, baby, than Conan was. And I agree with that. You got all of the elements there to include, all of the tropes. This is the kind of movie that couldn't get made today because you got the plucky princess who is being shopped around to be married off, and she's kneeing people in the balls right and left. You got bare breasts aplenty all over the place for no reason, and if they're not in bare breasts, they're in skimpy bikinis. You got the whole thing. This is your standard fantasy 80s fare. It could have come right out of Conan or something like that.
There is a reason for all that, and I will elucidate on that later.
Well, let's go around real quick because I do, I want to talk a little bit about the plot, and then we're going to get into, I want to get into cinematography, and then we could get into acting performances later. But I think the main thing I'd like to focus on today is how this movie was made, because I think it's a beautiful example of movie making from the time period, practical effects, and also film. and I want to hear what Lance has to say about that. But let's hear about the plot. And I'm going to start with you, Jeff. What did you think about the plot of this movie from your standard fantasy fare? And also, one of the things I do want to say is that in this era where every movie seems to be 3 hours, they crammed an awful lot of stuff in here.
They sure do.
A little over 90 minutes. And I really didn't have to make a whole bunch of leaps of logic. That seems to be a lost art. So I want to hear what you guys.
You know what? That's all you need is 98 minutes, 99 minutes, 100 minutes. That's all you need.
Now, I will say I am a fan of long form movies. I've enjoyed films like Henry V by Kenneth Branagh, Titanic, obviously by James Cameron, the Peter Jackson, Lord of the Rings films, and things like that. So there is a time and a place for a long form movie, but that shouldn't be every movie. A lot of movies should just get done. You get in, you enjoy it, you get out, sort of thing. And this movie to me reminds me of a kind of like a high-end graphic novel from back in the 80s. No, thank you for that. Yeah, it's really entertaining. It's surprisingly dense. They condense a lot into this plot line, and you never feel quite lost, even when you can see that this world has been going on for some time. When we build up the beginning of this film, all the elements are there. All those sort of tropey things, like you said, the evil king, the kingdom gets taken, the son has to flee and avenge. But then we have the 11-year time skip, and you find out that Prince Talon has become this legendary folk hero, and they keep reinforcing that in some really clever ways that would normally, I think, feel contrived in another movie. But like when they're in the brothel, it's like, oh no, Talon's been captured, and dudes are Talon, like I know Talon, all these guys are jumping up off the windows, like I know Talon too. The kings of the kingdoms know Talon. Like he is this kind of really cool legendary folk hero, and I like that they built that into this. Now the director Albert Pion plays kind of fast and loose with things. Details like that, sort of like you feel like you're coming into the middle of a story a little bit, but he has already set the beginning. And I'm a big fan of his films ever since this one. This was his directorial debut. And he's got a catalog of just really fun, action-packed movies with elements of humor baked in. And they're everything you want. There's a terrific film he did called Mean Guns, which was an excuse basically to have an 88-minute gun battle. I recommend everybody go see it. Perhaps my favorite action movie of all time, Nemesis, starring Olivier Gruner and Tim Thomerson, who he would direct as Doll Man, also known as Jack Death from the Trancer series. Just really great stuff. But this guy knows how to make really fun movies. He knows what's important. He gets it in there. He does the job. And this is his debut. It's not 100% on point. You'll see in the subsequent films that he refines his filmmaking and everything. But I just really love this movie. It's everything I want. I've heard somebody say before, like this, when they were making Conan the Destroyer, the guy who made Conan the Destroyer wanted to make that film after seeing this film. He felt like this movie was more Conan than Conan because the De Laurentiis Conan is very philosophical and brooding and gets into that aspect of Conan, but he just wanted to make a really fun, crazy action fantasy movie. So this movie clearly inspired that take with Destroyer. And it's so fun. The characters are fun. Even if you don't get really deep into the characters, there's enough there that you can identify with him. You can sympathize with Rodrigo and his plight, or the deposed prince, his sister. Your hero Talon, you get the most empathy for because you've got his origins. But it all just really works pretty well together, and it flows very nicely. And there are elements in there that keep this guy from just being, like a Gary Stu. He's not just this unstoppable destroyer who just whoops everybody with swords. He often has to use his wits. He often has to swashbuckle, and he often takes a fall, which is a lot of fun. Like you don't know precisely what's going to happen. You figure like, it's an 80s film. He's probably going to come out on the top in the end, but it's just got enough in there that you really enjoy it. surprising things that you just don't often see with too many action movies, especially today, where the hero has to struggle in clever, sometimes funny, and sometimes quite realistic ways. One of my favorite little bits is like when he sees the princess is getting prepared for the marriage, and he sees her naked, and he's like, "What?" He's distracted and gets knocked out of a window because he stopped to be like, "Do bro, man," and check her out, and he got knocked out of a castle window. It's terrific. I love these little details that are playfully make sense in the context. So this film's a big win for me.
Okay. I could definitely see that. To me, the way I saw it is that they give us enough plot to get us from action scene to action scene and moment to moment. So it's a
Yeah,
fun movie with enough plot that it could drive the movie
yeah,
forward.
and
But I don't.
it's unlike films where we've had the issue with like it just feels like a bunch of cool scenes strung together. This feels like a bunch of cool scenes that are actually connected in some way,
Yeah.
and that goes from like not just the fun and the swashbuckling, but there are even some honestly kind of horrific things that happen in the film,
Oh,
especially in the intro. Man, they set a heck of a tone, and then they shift gears on you as the film goes on, and then ramp back up to that. So it's really skillfully handled in my perspective, especially from a first time director.
well, I will say, as a horror fan, as someone who leans more towards wanting the scary aspects of fantasy and stuff like that, what they gave me in that intro really piqued my interest, and
Yeah,
then I was a little bit disappointed because we didn't get back to that. I don't think we ever really got back to that level where you have
no,
this crypt with living faces and stuff like that. I wanted 90 minutes of that, but
yeah, that was nightmare fuel for sure.
yeah.
Loved it
So
though.
which I love. So, because I'm a sick man. Lance, what did you think of the plot going on here in the movie and how it drove the movie forward?
Well, I think that what's fun is that they have the layers, the subplots. I mean, obviously, we start this movie off, and as a kid seeing this at the Continental Movie Theater, while I'm 11 years old, my brother and his friend dragged me and his nephew to see. I didn't know what I was in for. I just knew. I saw the poster in the newspaper, the three sword, the three-bladed sword, the muscle guy, the lady, the snake. All right, this has got to be good. I'm a kid. So you go to the movie theater to see this, and that opening sequence, you're watching this on a 70 millimeter screen, and it's like, is this a horror movie? What the heck is this? So, ripping hearts out of people's chests, and it's like, this is serious. And to boot, I mean, you have Cromwell, the main villain, who's played by Richard Lynch, who even at that time I knew was your villains of villains from
Yeah.
from the late 60s to the 70s to the 80s. This guy was the face of villainy on every TV show and every cop movie out there. The Seven Ups. This guy was heavy. So seeing his image, I already knew this is going to be serious, and it was fun. Okay, so you start off with this horror aspect of it. Reviving a sorcerer because you're losing the battle. This even goes. This is beyond Hellboy. You know what I mean? This is what the Nazis wanted to do. This is what sorcery for your army so that you can crush your opponents. But of course, messing with that is like messing with a nuclear bomb. It always goes bad, and which it does. In the film in very clever ways, because even when he thinks he kills the sorcerer Zusha, he disappears. But now there's this impending: is he around? And we find out he's always been around, cleverly disguised as like his viceroy. And it's really fun how it reveals itself. On top of that, you have the Talon story. His kingdom is smashed. Of course, he's on the run, and he becomes this folklore hero, like Jeff says. But on the same token, he's really not in it, to beat Cromwell or to overthrow a sorcerer. He's just like a gun for hire. And he falls into this situation and then ends up handling it, which I think was a nice turn of events. He wasn't obsessed with beating Cromwell. He wasn't obsessed with overthrowing his kingdom. Basically, he wants one night with a woman as payment to get her disposed brother out of prison. I mean, it takes neat little turns story-wise, but still everything is propelled forward through character interaction. So this is a clever use of storytelling and a high dollar movie. I'm not going to call this movie a B flick for its time. It was a high dollar movie, and it was fun. So I enjoyed it in 1982. I enjoyed rewatching it a couple of times before this podcast, and it was like, this has all the elements of a Raiders of the Lost Ark. It's got the swashbuckling.
Mm-hmm.
It has that whole idea of you can propel a story forward through action and still tell a story. It just isn't all about the action and the choreography, because this is the day that this day predates CGI, so it's all practical effects. Real guys diving off of cliffs and dying because they missed the mat. Real fights, real sword throwing. It's fun stuff. Hitting swords together with flint rock, so you can see that they spark for real. That
Yes.
wasn't optical effects. So it's an example of what filmmaking should be, and how storytelling takes precedence over the CGI imagery and special effects and action. And for a sophomore effort, this was a great flick. This is one that I think you, as a director, you can be proud of 40 years later, saying, "Hey, yeah, I made that flick because it was fun." And the total Hollywood fare. There was a couple of stock footage shots of castles. The rest, this is pure Hollywood. It's all done in Hollywood, all Hollywood sets, all Hollywood environments with named television actors. There was no real big actors in this movie, but it was just enough to get that massive theatrical release and stake its claim in the pantheon of the genre. So, this is a movie I stand behind in all its imperfections, because there's a lot of them. But you look beyond it, because it's like it's just too much fun to really tear it to pieces. It's like you can, but why? There's one thing leads to another, and every aspect of it is hilarious, or it's got a great horror element to it. But hey, this is what cinema's about. To me, this is the fun stuff. So I like the way the story was handled. Of course, like I said, there are some plot holes and problems, but you look beyond it, because after it's tongue in cheek. What are you going to do? Sometimes if it takes itself too serious, you create more plot holes because people think about it too much. This isn't designed for that. It's just designed for the swashbuckling aspect of it. You eat your popcorn, you enjoy it, and you're going to remember imagery. You're going to remember Zusha. You're going to remember the sword with the 3 blades. You're going to remember the action. You're going to remember the silly catchphrases and lines. That's what cinema's about. And a thoroughly enjoyable movie that helped set the tone for sword and sorcery in the 80s. This was one of the ones. This is the one you have to watch.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. It's like I said, I haven't seen this movie till today, but I've always known about the 3-bladed sword. I just didn't know where it came from, but it was like a staple among fantasy, and I think what you said about this movie being just a movie to enjoy, and I think we've lost that, especially in online conversation. So many of these movies are overanalyzed. Sometimes you're making a movie just to have fun, and that's okay.
Absolutely.
That's okay, and I think that's what this movie does. One of the things I do appreciate plot-wise is that I think this is a direct descendant of movies that I absolutely love, that I have watched multiple times. Movies like the Golden Voyage of Sinbad, Jason and the Argonauts. It's the same basic plot with the variations. All of those movies. You have a damsel. You have various. Golden Voyage of Sinbad had a sorcerer in it. You have these types of things, and they change it up, but you know what to expect. And you as the viewer know what to expect, but you're going in there to have fun, to enjoy what you're going to be given action-wise. With Sinbad, some great stop action footage from Harryhausen, just great stuff. And so, yeah, I mean, that's what you're looking at here. And I don't think, I wanted to talk about the plot a little bit, but I think your point is right, too. It's like, yeah, we could tear apart where the holes and stuff are, but that's not the point of this movie. The point of the plot of this movie is to drive the movie forward so that we could enjoy it. It's not to give you some great Game of Thrones saga or something,
Right.
that. And not every movie has to be like that. So that said, you hit on some stuff with the production. And now I really want to get into that. And I'm going to say a little bit, and I'm going to go to Lance first, then we'll go to Jeff, is that I talked about that opening scene. And as much as I liked it from a horror standpoint, I got to talk about it from a production standpoint. And I really want to hear what Lance has to say, because right off the bat, I mean, I have grown as a film watcher because of Cinema Crusaders, hearing Lance's input, and I look for different things. And I will say the opening scene, they smash through a wall and these skulls tumble down onto the ground, and it's lit by fire, and it's actual fire, but they've done the lighting right, and it's on film. And so the way I get this whole scene, it's absolutely beautiful. So I'm looking at a cave floor and wall with skulls on it, lit by fire, but it's just so beautiful. And then it transitions into them going down this cave and then eventually finding this tomb. And the whole thing is incredibly well lit. And I know, having watched enough, production of movies, that all of this is on a soundstage somewhere, and they haven't built the whole tunnel. It's half a tunnel, so they can film from the side as they're going through and everything. But it's just so well done. And as Lance would like to say, it's an example of how you make films, movie making done right. None of it is CGI. None of it is green screen. And it feels absolutely beautiful. It's all practical when he comes up out of the liquid, and he's got all the liquid, and then the witch is like licking the liquid off of him, which is disgusting.
It's disgusting.
That's so gross.
Yeah, but I absolutely love it, and it just sets the tone. And then the rest of the movie doesn't disappoint. I mean, there are all of the fight scenes are beautiful. They get this. I'm going to almost say a hazy natural quality to them through a natural lighting process. It's not oversaturated. It feels realistic. So everything is really cool. I love all of that. And I really wanted to hear what you guys had to say about the production value in this movie, because I think, especially for someone like you said, this is his first or second movie, it's really well done. I think that the shots are well done, that the way that they did the effects and everything were well done. And if we could ever get this guy, Lance and I were talking about this beforehand, Albert Pyun, I'd love to talk to him about his career, because he's made a career his own way.
I want to be a part of that if that happens.
Yeah. So, Lance, what did you think about the production value, how they made this film, how they shot this film? So.
Oh, it's top notch. I mean, it's top notch Hollywood fare. And even though, like the director of photography, Joseph Mangine, I mean, not a name of whose names in Hollywood, but sometimes a lot of these skilled cinematographers, director of photographies, they come from that television world. They come from that run and gun B movie world. Now, B movie doesn't necessarily mean low budget. I mean, it doesn't mean low quality, because they still have the same cameras everybody else is using, the same lenses, but you got to be crafty on how you make that image look high dollar.
Is it fair to say that sometimes you have more skill because you have to do more with less?
Absolutely. You have to figure it out. And it's all smoke and mirrors, man. Like you're saying, real fire, real torches, which today you probably wouldn't do. You'd light it and CGI that torch, and you use CGI flames because it's safer, but still get a mister out there. Haze that lighting up. If you have that, you're going to add an element of light that's not very relevant in a lot of the HD movies, because the film stock is going to enhance it. It's going to look more like a painting than just a Saturday morning kid show. You're going to add these elements to it that are fantastic. And when they break into that keep, the lighting is exposed through the light where they're coming into, which is beautiful. And you have that smoke and that haze that lights that light beam, and there's no CGI yet there. That's the real deal. So it's all lit. It's all studio. That's all in a studio, and you have gaffers and grips and dudes holding lights and people waving smoke everywhere. And then all that matters is what's in that frame. No matter how goofy it looks outside of that frame, which will always make you laugh when you see a film being made, all that matters is what's in that frame. And when the actors are spot on and they're doing what they need to do, boom, you suspend your disbelief, and you're there. You're in that time frame. So that's a craft. And the director, the producers, the director of photographies, the costumers, everything. They did everything they needed to do to try to capture this fantasy era. We don't know where it's at. We don't even know if it's on Earth. We don't know what it is. And that's the beauty of it. Sometimes if you timestamp something, there's more expectation. But if you don't, then you have more free reign. So I think this is where the movie went right production-wise. And also, dirt, filth. You know, Talon is dirty, filthy this entire movie. He doesn't look like a supermodel. His hair is matted and dirty. And a lot of the people just look filthy. And I love the way that played out. That's the way the era should be, like Monty Python. Everybody was dirty, disgusting. That's, to me, that's anti-Hollywood right there. Even though this is a Hollywood movie, there's no glamour shots really until we see, you know, the harem girls and all that. But that's because of necessity. But otherwise, I think this is a top-notch produced film, even right down to the James Bond medieval weaponry, you know, shooting blades, and the wicked fight in the end where a sword breaks, boom, they bust the handle and they got a bigger knife, or the staff has a blade or a spike popping off on every end. You know, just when you think the guy's out for the count, he's not. There's this really cool James Bond element, and I remember being in the movie theater and people just laughing and roaring that it was great. Like, oh shoot, he broke his sword, boom, he has the knife. You know, Cromwell loses his sword, he grabs his staff, blades start flipping out on both ends. You know, I mean, everybody was just digging this, and it holds up. So
that was incredibly popular at the time across multiple genres too. I mean, I remember even The Last Starfighter, where the guy had the scepter that turns into a mace, it turns into a stabbing weapon, you know. So it's like,
yeah, and that's thinking, that's production design. Somebody's figuring this out to say, hey, how do we make this more fun? And I was sold right when young Talon, you know, shoots that blade off through a guy's head, and it's like, oh, that's cool. Did he just shoot that blade? You know, how did that happen? You know what I mean? And just right down to the details. And if you notice that in the beginning, when young Talon has his hand pinned to a tree with a arrow, and then when he's gone and Cromwell comes to investigate the scene, there's that little piece of meat dangling from the arrow. It's like disgusting, like the sorceress licking the stuff off the Zusha's hand. I mean, there's these little gross elements through the whole movie that make you cringe. It's like, is this a comedy? Is this a gore fest? What is this? And who cares? Let's just go for the ride. But all those elements sold it to me production-wise. I thought, okay, this would be a fun movie to make. I mean, I would have loved to be on that set and just eat it up, because this is the way the movie should be. Not everything has to be a glamour shot per se. I mean, it has to be produced, but it doesn't need to be a glamour shot. And this is a movie that's a perfect example of it. And it's fun. I like it. And that's one thing I shout out about the production value. Because who knows, balsa wood, paper mache, it doesn't matter what those sets were. Lit right, hazed right, hey, you think it's a cave. And that's all that matters. So they did their job well, all around.
And I will say, once again, I go back to one of the things that I will say, I'm sure all of us will recommend that if you're a fan of fantasy, go back and check this movie out if you haven't seen it. The thing you have to do is turn off your modern sensibility that is going to overanalyze stuff. Because, yes, a lot of the weapons are ridiculous. They couldn't exist in real life. A lot of the fighting is not the best. And if it was today, you'd have 20 YouTube videos, breaking down why you can't do this or you can't do that. And that's not what this is all about. It's a fantasy movie to have fun. So it's like, and hopefully we can get back to that. We can start having more movies where it's like, we don't care if this is real life. We want to just present you something that you can sit back and divorce yourself from your real life for 90 minutes and enjoy. And that's what this movie does.
Absolutely. Really, and you look at modern movies, $100 million movie, $100 million video, and it's shot poorly. It's photographed, very poorly. It's lit poorly. Now you can still see outlines of green screen and digital. We've come this far to shoot video and see it poorly rendered when it was done 10 times better in the optical age. Come on, let's get real here. People, in a sense, are already are already conditioned to think what something should look like now. And it's only been like 10, 15 years. They think everything needs to have that video Saturday morning soap opera look. But why can't it look like all the movies I loved in the old days? Because they're not doing it that way anymore. They're shooting videos, not film. You can do so much more on film than you can on video. 100 times more.
And there he is, the high priest of film, Lance Cicero.
Absolutely. I'm selling it because we can't give up on it.
Yeah.
It's the best.
And I will say also, I'm saying all this as someone who in his writing loves to be into details. I love to give you plausibility. But I also know that when I write, there are sometimes when I write things and I don't need to give you an explanation because just what I'm giving you is for enjoyment. For instance, and I'm not going to sell the product, but if I give you a demonic doll, I don't need to give you all the areas where that doll came from. You just know that it's an evil little doll who is sarcastic and you can enjoy it for what it is,
Yeah. And you think about it, you look at the modern movies and all these characters half the time look like they just stepped out of the hair salon. They all their costumes, the lighting sometimes is so overdone and the video is so in your face, you can see the seam sewing lines in it. It's like, well, did they just buy this right now? I mean, what? And you look at a Sword and the Sorcerer, they just pillaged the lot where all the costumes were. Give me. The talent was in that big freaking fur coat for half the movie, sweating his ass off before he's finally nailed to a cross. It's like, and I remember while watching it, and even my dad was like, "Geez, he must be dying in that thing." I said, "Those are halogen lights beaming down on him. That sweat is real."
Yeah, it's not like our LED lights of today, man.
Right, and he's wearing this big thing, and it's like, you don't see the seam lines. You don't see where it was sewn. They didn't just take it off of the production rack newly sewn. I guarantee you they found that somewhere in one of the lots. Oh, let's use this. Just wrap him in that. He'll be okay. Yeah, that looks good. Let's go.
Well, I think
that's movie making.
I'm going to get to Jeff in just a second, but I think it's interesting, too, that the character of Talon is played by Lee Horsley, who his real background is mostly Westerns or period pieces from the 1800s. Mm-hmm. And you can really get that feel that he's got that...
he's got that swagger, man.
Yeah, he's got that
it's
cowboy feel.
It's Errol Flynn. He was playing Errol Flynn.
Dude, he's Han Solo, he's Jack Sparrow, he's all those kinds of characters that we love here in America. That bombastic attitude of heroism that sometimes starts off a little bit callously, like Han Solo, like he's just into it for the money. But you find out, he's kind of the mercenary with a heart of gold at the end. But we love that guy. He's John Wayne.
I will say that the line that stuck with me the most and would have fired up 11-year-old me and fired up 50-something-year-old me was at the end when the princess looks at him and goes, "I think you have a reward to collect," or something like that. He goes, "Indeed, we do." I was like, "Hell yeah!"
And then they swing at it
for no reason.
What's more swashbuckling than that? He's got the girl and he's going to swing out of frame with her.
And then his crew is like, "Did you collect your debt?" And he's like, "Oh yes, I did." You're like, "Well,
and then some."
Yeah. So you're like, okay. So, an 11-year-old me's going, "Yeah," and a 50-year-old me's going, "Yeah." So
that's exactly how I did it. I walked out of that theater, I remember as a kid going, I don't know what just hit me, but that was really, really, really cool. And I want to do something like that.
Yeah. Mm. That's when I look at my wife, I go, "I have a debt to collect." My wife laughs at me, but so. So Jeff, production value, what do you think?
Okay. It's like Lance said, it's a Hollywood film, but it's an independent film. And it was the highest grossing independent film of its day, which is really impressive when you think about it. And like you said, I always thought it was a little bit lower budget because you can tell that they did raid the stores and the lots.
Yeah.
And I think they were very clever in the way they did it. Some of the costumes matched. And then you'd see a lot of guys who are kind of bare chested, well, why is that guy a general? And it's like, okay. They only had so much costume stuff to get around, but they also did clever things they would make sure a lot of the guards would have a face wrap so you can keep reusing the same stunt guys, the same actors. Yeah. And so, you figure out these cool little cheats to make your production look much higher value than it is. And this guy, again, I can't say enough about director Alec Pune. Check out his catalog. He is a genius at this, and he's a genius out of the gate going forward. all of his movies are incredibly watchable, and he manages to stretch a dollar like in a way that what's his face, Roger Corman wishes he could. It's absolutely genius what he does. So when I look at this film, and I harken back to films, like Beastmaster, which feel similar in a lot of ways. Like just cannibalizing what you've got, and making the best you can. Uh, it's very clear. One thing is very clear about this film is he is very, very clearly inspired by the paintings of Frank Frazetta. We saw that in Millis's Conan, who very deliberately tried to recreate those images, and we see that again here. The lighting is gorgeous, and it's this high contrast, high color value lighting. The reds, the greens, the blues, the oranges. It's just swath in color for so much of the film. And then when he doesn't need that, he dials it back. He has like the more mundane sort of scenes, like in the daytime. Oh, we're gonna kill all Zosha. Like let's show how he's weak. We're gonna like light him very flat, very plain, even though we've already seen him in this scary context. And it's really smart how he does that to get different effects out of the scenes. This guy, I wonder if he'd been making a lot of short films before he started doing this, because he has an incredible eye for this sort of thing. And even though this isn't Conan, it's so inspired by Conan that by the end of the movie, he is Conan. He's got him naked in a loincloth, swinging a big sword while being dirty, bloody, and grimy. And it's just absolutely fantastic. And, the love of this genre is all over the frame. It's just completely all over it. And like Lance said, if you light things properly, get a little bit of smoke in there, you can have things that are made out of styrofoam and they're just painted nicely and lit nicely. One of the most ingenious films I ever saw was a low budget, super low budget horror movie where the film crew didn't film in a cave, but they built a series of caves out of wood framing, chicken wire, and plaster of Paris and Fuller's earth to dirty it up. And it was totally convincing where I was watching it because the way they lit it and the way they moved the camera and the way everybody treated it like it was a natural environment. So this is yet another fantastic example of that. And it's just so doggone good. Now, if we were watching this today, and as somebody who studied martial arts and a big fan of Asian cinema, I love to see all the really cool action choreography. I love to see like what Keanu is doing in John Wick. I love to see the highbrow sword fighting and things like Hidden Dragon, like a Crouching Dragon, Hidden Tiger. But I also love this movie so much because it's not refined combat. Even though uh, I don't know how early in the career he is, like Anthony DeLongis, who plays Rodrigo, is a sword master, a whip expert, obviously an actor. He's in one of my favorite episodes of Highlander, the TV series, an episode called Duende, about a Spanish-style fencing master taking on Connor McLeod. The guy really knows his stuff. So I haven't looked in to see who did the choreography for this, but I do like the fact that this choreography feels more natural because oftentimes you learn all these skills as a martial artist or a weapons master, and when it comes down to the fight, you have all these options, but your gross muscle memory tends to go to quick, short, brutal, snappy things. You often don't get the opportunity to be very fanciful with your blade work, and we see that here. This looks like real guys fighting, and that just made it a bit more fun for me. Even though like I said, I appreciate the high end choreography that we get out of something like most recently Dune. Some really nice sword work in there, based on the Filipino martial arts. But here, this was great. And how do they jazz it up? Like Lance said, the fight was amazing because we've got clearly magical swords. You got the three-bladed sword. You're like, well, that wouldn't ever work. Oh, it shoots those blades. Now it works. How cool is that? And we find out that Cromwell's sword has got to be magical because it just hacks through any other sword it sees. It don't give a crap about that. He's smashing through rocks with this sword. And the way that they just keep going, ramping up the action by like, I've got a hidden blade here. Well, I've got a hidden blade here. Well, this my hidden blade staff breaks into two weapons. How about, what are you going to do with that? It's like, oh, I got a blade in the end of my dagger hilt. Like, oh, it just keeps going, and it just took what could have been a very generic, very boring thing to a whole new level because the director has to deal with what he's got to deal with, and that has forced a great deal of creativity on him. And I just respect the heck out of him so much for looking for the squeeze every bit of juice out of this thing and get the most that he could possibly get onto the screen. He makes it all work, and it's just beautiful to look at. Some of the shots I would have changed, but that's with the hindsight of having viewed movies for many decades. And you'll see in his work, he learns how to do things. Like Lance has said, there are flaws, there are gaps, there are things. But man, when he is on point, he is on point in this film. Again, it's surprising that this is a sophomore effort. It just looks that good so much of the time. And I was talking about like the reasons for the nudity and stuff. Again, it's this love of the artwork of Frazetta and the pulp fantasy fiction that it comes from. This is why we have so many scantily clad women there. It's not just for the titillation. It's the fact that this is what it's coming from. He is honoring the source in almost a religious sense, like he is paying so much tribute to it. And
it's also part of the setting. I mean,
it is part of
it's the genre, which is fun.
You had Howard, and then you had Fritz Leiber with the Fafford the Great Mouser stuff was all about that. I mean, it all comes out of those. Well, I think Leiber was the 1920s, but this whole era of writers at that time who were writing high fantasy, sword sorcery.
And
stuff.
you wouldn't get that sort of thing today. And even then, one of the things I love about this production is, you're like, oh, the girls aren't just eye candy, or they don't have to be strong woman the whole time. These ladies are capable, even though they're women. The princess stabs guys; she's kneeing them in the nuts. You find out that the concubine is on the side of the resistance. That's another aspect. I know we're going back into the story a bit, but that's another aspect of this that, like, the resistance was so deeply ingrained into the story, and I just love the way they worked all of this stuff in. It's just magnificent. I cannot praise him enough for this film.
And I think what's funny too, even about casting, is like, obviously there are certain cast members in the movie that are beefcake, and only a mild few can act. And then you have like Talon's right hand dude, who's as skinny as a waif, but he's a better actor.
These people look like they belong there. As soon as you see a movie that's just full of like Hollywood glamour models, you're like, your brain already starts turning off a little bit as far as that goes. But these people, the women are beautiful because that's their function in the society. They're going to be the courtesans, they're going to be the harems, or if you want to have like a romantic inclination, you want the princess to at least be pretty to a degree. But the people living in this world look rough and tough, and and nobody is super handsome. And like Lance said, like the production, like they made sure like the people who need to look grimy looked suitably grimy. There was a lot of great blood in the way that people come out of battle, and they got blood caked on themselves, caked on their armor. You can see the dents, the dings, the scrapes. It's like all of that just sells it. It goes back to that sort of Lucas aesthetic. One of the things that everybody keeps talking about when you look at the first Star Wars, it looks so lived in. And it adds this whole level of plausibility. It's even in this fantastic concept construct and these crazy weapons, and a guy can rip hearts out of you, Indiana Jones style. It all sells it, and you willingly just go along for the ride because you just buy into it because he sold it so well.
And I think I do want to talk about.
You said, you did nail it because this predates Temple of Doom. We already have the Sorcerer taking the heart out.
I am sure Spielberg saw that. I know Spielberg must have saw it. And was like, I want to do that someday.
And I will say, we'll talk a little bit in just a second. One over the world look at the cast. But I think this movie is considered a cult classic. And cult classics generally are cult classics for a reason, and that critics didn't like them from a filmmaking perspective, or they had a problem with this aspect or the acting or whatever. But people enjoy the movies, and that's why they become cult classics. So even though they may not be the greatest, they're not the greatest movie ever made, they are movies that entertain people and live on. And I think that is commendable.
And it was highly profitable, like Jeff said. I mean, this movie made like $40 million.
Yeah.
And that is
That
That's
was
a
a lot for
blockbuster.
back then. That was a
Yeah.
whole lot for back then.
That's a
back then.
blockbuster.
And I will, but real quick before we get off film production, I do want to highlight one particular scene and just give our listening audience or our viewing audience an idea of the difference between then and now, and how filmmakers now could save a lot of money and give us a better production value. There's a scene in a tavern, and all of these people in there, and there are winches in there, and there's debauchery going on, and everything else, and if this scene was made today, everybody would be on a green screen soundstage, and it would be highly lit. And then later on, they would come in and they would add in, various layers as they rendered the scene. So first they would add in a lighting layer, then they would add in a haze layer, a smoke layer, and they would just add layer over layer, and they'd color correct it and all this other stuff. Meanwhile, this scene was filmed probably, it was probably filmed in multiple takes, I'm sure, but it was filmed on set with the actual lighting. The candles that are actually there, physical candles, are providing you the smoke and haze and the torches. The people that are in the background, you don't have to worry about color correcting people in the back to make it look real, because the shadows and everything are real. So that does the whole tavern gives you this shadowy feel, this hazy feel, this grimy, disgusting. This is the kind of feel where you find a scoundrel, that you're looking for. You get all that naturally. So you don't have to go back and spend millions and millions of dollars and processing, computer processing everything. And this is kind of what we're talking about. I don't think all of us hate CGI completely, but CGI has its place. It's, has its time and place for certain things. But
that's
this is
the thing
not one
right
of
there.
them. So
the CGI, the color correction, the processing, all of that are tools. And the thing with any tool is if you overuse a tool, then you miss the mark. You lose the value of what you're trying to do.
And you're trying to recreate reality when you don't need to do it. And it's cost you millions of dollars that you could have used on other things or on other projects. It could have gone to a first-time director who needs a $2 million budget to
$100,000. $100,000 for CGI haze. Like, well, I got a smoke machine right over here.
Yeah,
right. And that's how we still do it.
Mm-hmm.
We have a mister. We haze up a warehouse to shoot a shot so that it diffuses the light. It works much better. And the idea is, like you're saying, ma'am, I mean, they built a set. I would rather spend on a handful of carpenters to build a set than spend on 200 CGI artists to complete that shot. It's just not practical. It is just not. It's to me that's asinine, because that set, you modify, you relight, you can use it for something else. You know what I mean? That's what they did in Hollywood. Oh, we got a tavern set. All right, we'll bring the set dressers in. We'll change the curtains. We'll get different tables. We'll rearrange it. That's how it was sustainable. Now it's a green screen.
And eventually those sets would transition into movies. I mean, or to TV shows. You look at Seinfeld. Right. The subway set that they used continually was an actual subway car that they took and turned it into a set. It's a series of 3 cars. It had been in a number of movies, and then it transitioned into Seinfeld, and they used it there. It has been used a number of times in other stuff. And it's just ingenious. And it saves you money. It gives those studios more money to do, to have to spend on smaller projects. I mean, you want to give new creators the ability to get $400,000 or $500,000 to create a small film. Well, if you're not spending a couple $1 million and 6 weeks of time on post-production on just some haze, then you could do that, So, I mean, this is the kind of thing that I think is really important, and hopefully we'll get back to that we need to have that practical has its place, and it's like, and film has its place, and hopefully they will get back to that as well. But it needs to start with practical first. Not everything has to be CGI on a green screen. Matte paintings need to come back. Sometimes matte paintings are, and not only that, to give people work, So, I there are great artists that deserve to work, and let's get them to work. So, but anyway, I'll get off my soapbox. So let's talk about the cast and the acting. I don't know, for me, short of, I think the guy who plays Cromwell, I think your point about him being the villain's villain is absolutely right.
Oh man,
He's a face you immediately recognize.
one of the best villain actors of a decade.
Yeah. So you recognize, if you grew up in that era, you recognize that face all the time, and even if you don't know where you recognize it from, you recognize it. So, but I wanted to talk about the acting as a whole, and real quick, what I will say is this: is that the acting was perfectly adequate for the film. They did a good job with it, and even where it's lacking at time, it adds to the charm and the feel of the movie. So it doesn't, and I think that's another thing. Once again, I'm on a soapbox a lot today, but I think that we get hypercritical of things today. You guys were talking about the way that the weapons had all these different components and everything. Well, and I contrasted that with the first time, Lucas did a little bit of that the first time he revealed the staff lightsaber. But then people start going way crazy into breaking it down, and they got all into Kylo Ren's saber and everything. It's like, sometimes you have to just put that part of your mind away and say, that's just cool. It just looks cool, and I say that as someone who does like to be, hyper into details and everything. I recognize that, but sometimes you just got to put another part of your mind and say, that's just cool. I like it. It doesn't matter if it's real. So I think that's with the acting here as well. It's like, sometimes it is over the top. Sometimes it is not the best acting in the world. But you know what? This is part of the genre. It's part of the appeal and the beauty and the charm of this movie, because it transports you to something that isn't taking itself too seriously. It's doing just enough to say, here's what we're doing. We're giving you this. We're going to kick some ass, and you're going to enjoy it. And you're like, hell yeah, yes I am. So
it's funny you say that, because there was a part of me initially that when it's revealed that Cromwell's sword is just knocking all the sabers in half, you're like, okay, I would have liked to have seen, we know that King Richard had this magical 3-bladed sword. Maybe Zusha was there to create Cromwell an equally powerful magical sword. But by the time I got to the end of the movie, I didn't care about that anymore, because I realized 11 years has elapsed. And so there have just been things at play, and I just considered that part of the world by that.
Yeah, you don't need the backstory on the sword.
Yeah.
It's just too much.
Yeah. I mean, so there are two, and you can have that part of your mind, but I think it's worthwhile sometimes to say, look, you know what? It's got all this stuff, and I can sit there and talk about it and question it, but I also owe it to myself as a person, a moviegoer, to just turn all that off and just sit here for 90 minutes and escape and enjoy.
After you've seen a sword that launches off 2 of its blades, a sword that just chops through other swords and rocks does not break the logic of the world.
No. And you know what? And you're absolutely right. We could sit here and spend 45 minutes talking about how that would destroy the sword, but really, it doesn't matter, because in the context of this world and this movie, we don't really care, because it's fun and it gave us some Hollywood fun. So I want to hear what you guys have to say about the overall acting performance before we kind of get into our last segment and wrap this up. So I'm going to go with Jeff and then come to Lance. Jeff, what did you think of the acting ensemble and how they acted their performances throughout the movie?
I think for the most part, as you said, the acting was serviceable. Everybody involved in this could tell, we're not making Shakespeare here. But I feel like everybody was on board. The best 2 performances in the film are Richard Mall as the Sorcerer Zusha and Richard Lynch as King Cromwell. They really give it their all. Followed behind by what's his name, Lee Horsley as Talon. But he doesn't have to go for the Oscar for this, because he's just playing that kind of Han Solo, Errol Flynn kind of swashbuckling dude. He's that Indiana Jones, kind of, I'm a little bit smarmy, a little bit this, a little bit that. But, at the end of the day, I'm going to get business done, and I'm going to do it for the right reasons, even if I don't let you know that right away. I love his whole negotiating with the princess. This guy clearly doesn't care about the reward. He clearly doesn't care about the money. He's got his own agenda, but he doesn't let her know that. And it's such a fun thing to watch him play that out, because he's got the princess eating out of the palm of his hand. And today, if you had a character doing that, you'd be like, oh, what a misogynist. he's manipulating that poor princess into giving up her virginity for him. It's like, and by the end of the day, she wants to because of all the heroic things he's done, and he does do heroic things. And uh, I love the way he portrays this character, where like the peasant army is getting ready to get executed, and he spends a good amount of time sitting there. Now it's been a while since I saw this movie, and I was like, when's he gonna do something? And it all makes sense the way he plays it. And, he just stands there very casually at the end of saving all their butts. Again, we've already talked about how Richard Lynch was the preeminent villain of his day. He made a bloody career out of it, and he was very good at it. Richard Mall, who most people know as the beloved Bull Shannon from the Night Court TV series. This was my first exposure to him, and I didn't even know it was this guy for forever because of all the makeup. But I was really excited to see him do other things once I realized who that was. And I do wish that he had more screen time. It almost would have been nice if the Chamberlain had been him. Richard Mall doing his own thing, but his height would have totally given it away, unfortunately. But he's a really great actor, really great comedic actor, and also a really great villainous actor, particularly if you see this or movies like House, where he plays a really good turn in that as well. So fantastic on that point. Everybody else does what they need to do, and I feel like every actor, from the people who are just like, maybe just getting started, to maybe some guys they pulled off the production to fill some roles, because some of it feels like that. It definitely felt like there's a little bit of ADR going on here and there, but everybody was clearly having fun. Nobody looked like they were having a bad time. Some people would say some cheesy lines, and like they would just roll with it, and they're into it. And it just all felt very organic in that respect. So even when it's not an Academy Award-winning performance, I'm still there because, like you said, there's a charm to it. Because you can tell when somebody is really having fun on a production. You look at a movie like Young Frankenstein, which was Terry Garr's first film, and she talks about how much fun making that movie was, and she thought all movies were going to be fun like that, and she found out later, like, oh no, not everything's fun like that. But it really there's an atmosphere on the set that goes from the people you see in front of the camera to, if you've been on the set, you would have seen it behind the camera, I'm sure. And again, that just adds to your enjoyment in a subconscious sort of way.
I will say this about Richard Mall real quick before I go to Lance. He is also a voice actor, and voice actors have a unique talent for being able, even when they're all covered up in prosthetics and everything, to project and act through their voice. Richard Mall did Harvey Dent, Two-Face in Batman the Animated Series, and he also did the Scorpion in Spider-Man the Animated Series, among other things. So very, very talented man. Lance, what did you think of the acting on some of the acting performances for the movie, what it brought to the movie, things like that?
Well, it was 100% nuts and bolts. These are Richard Lynch, once again, he was already 12 years ahead. So he has charisma, and we've talked about the it factor, the charisma factor, and from the moment he starts speaking at the beginning of the movie, you're sold. He's the heavy, he's the villain. That's all there is to it. And he rocks it. He stays consistent through the whole film, and it works perfectly. Lee Horsley, I mean, he's borderline nudge, nudge, wink, wink, but not to the point where it distracts. He's there to play that part, and he sells it. And I think that's the function of a performer. Yeah, you're not going to get probably the Shakespearean lines and what have you, but the point is you're there to work. You're there to sell it. And at the end of the day, everybody did. And it doesn't matter in what roundabout way it happened. So, I mean, we have TV actors, Richard Lynch was the heavy. I mean, you also had, I think, what's his name? The barkeeper, Jeff Corey. Dude's been in every cowboy movie, he's been in everything. So he's that old guard that was there. Robert Tessier, the bald guy, the torturer. He's that guy in every single movie and TV show he's been in. So you can see when they were casting, it was like, these guys will do the job. Let's get them. And they did. And at the end of the day, it was sold. That's it. That's what you want. They had careers after this. People may not remember that, but they had careers. They were around a couple more decades and some. So it all worked out exactly the way it needed to work out. And that's kind of what you just want. You know, I've been on a set and had my lines destroyed by a performer that just didn't measure up, and I already had to think how I'm going to cut them out of the movie. It's a horrid feeling, but when the right people are there getting it right and having a great time, this is the way it's supposed to be.
Sometimes
And
there's really something to be said for hiring a bunch of character actors sometimes.
Yeah, I think that's what I would say, is that they are all professional actors, people who were cast. You know, and this was in the era when you had guest actors, and that was a legitimate career to be a guest actor on shows. You know, a number of different shows that come on, and you had to be a professional actor that came and did your job. You know, and for maybe one episode or two episodes.
Right. Richard Lynch, man, Rockford Files. I mean, the list goes on. The TV show this guy was in, and it's like, let's call him. He'll show up on time, most likely. We don't know any of the personal stuff, but he's going to do his job no matter what. And at the end of the day, the job is done. And when that happens, they get the paycheck. You walk away. You move on. That's how it should be.
You know, and I wanted to bring up one other guy before we wrap this thing up with some final thoughts. Simon Mccorkandale, who plays Micah. Now, this guy is very recognizable to me. He would have a career mostly on TV shows, including Falcon Crest, soap operas. You know, he was a soap opera type actor, and I think he was cast correctly because he had to bring that drama. You know, he was the one that was injured, and it was giving you those feels, you know, when he's recovering from the injuries and being tortured and everything. But at the same time, he did feature in some fairly big movies, including one of my favorites from the 70s, Death on the Nile. So he's in the 1978 Death on the Nile movie, starring opposite, I forget who else was in it. David Niven is in that movie.
That was
Diana Rigg.
That was his big breakthrough role right there.
Yeah.
That's the one that put him on the map. So
he actually, I believe, he did the voiceover for the movie as well, Sword and the Sorcerer. Yeah. And I forget the name of the guy that was originally cast to do the voice, but they fired him because they didn't like the way his voice sounded. And Oliver Reed, I think it was.
Oh, okay.
Oliver Reed. So
another terrific actor.
A great actor. You know, and we were actually, Jeff and I were talking about Oliver, the movie, a while ago, and he was
speaking of Oliver Reed.
So he played Simon Doyle in Death on the Nile, and you could see that what he can bring from a dramatic standpoint. You know, with that, you know, the way he has the interpersonal relationships and almost histrionics that are so familiar to soap operas, and so he was well cast in this movie. So all of these people are these professional actors who have this skill set, these tools that they bring, and that is a tribute to the people who cast them, because they didn't have a bunch of huge names. What they had was a bunch of people who are very good at their craft, who could give you what you needed. So that's
what you're looking for if you're the casting director. You're looking, what's my budget, and finding the very best person per role. You know, whenever. And I know some writers do this who write films. Sometimes they write for a particular actor. I don't know if that's a good practice, because what are the odds you're actually going to get that actor? And it's better just to find the person who is going to embody that role as best they can.
And I hope you'll indulge me for a second, but I'm going to get on my soapbox one more time before I do final thoughts. I contrast this with another show that is airing right now. And I'm not going to name the show. But they decided to take.
I bet it has a certain ring to it. I'm thinking
they had decided to take. No, it doesn't.
Oh, okay. Surprise.
They decided to take valuable screen time, casting a moderately known rapper.
Oh no!
Just so she could get on screen and waste screen time twerking. Now, that could have been done. They could have used that screen time to bring in a professional actor to do something to actually advance this show, and they didn't.
Yeah, do something that serves the story, please.
Yeah, and instead we got a twerking moment, and it's all over social media and TikTok that, we got twerking. I was like, great, you got twerking. What did that do for the show?
Yeah, that was exciting.
You know, so I'll get off my soap opera now. And but my soapbox now, but I'm just like, she may be the greatest person, the nicest person in the world. I don't know her at all, but bringing someone on just to do a twerking scene just seems like an awful waste to me. So when you have actors out there who are good at their craft, who could have done something for you that really contributed to what the show is supposed to be.
Yeah,
All right.
somebody actually in that field who would have loved to have gotten that work.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So that said, I'm going to go final thoughts, and then we'll go ahead and wrap this puppy up. So, Lance, final thoughts for everybody out there, our viewing audience, on The Sword and the Sorcerer.
Well, it's a movie. It's a movie of its era, and a poignant era, and it's a movie that has influenced. So, having said that, it also reaches cult status for a reason, and it means that it's a film worth watching, because you're going to watch it and you're going to see a lot of movies that came after it that took many aspects of this film as inspiration and used it as their own, and I being one of them, because it's just that fun. It's just that fun. Why not? I'm glad I revisited this film. It's been a long time, but I didn't disappoint when I revisited it. It was like, okay, this is worth watching more than once, more than twice, and I did it. And I'm happy I saw it in the big screen, because once again, that's an absolute fantastic memory to see Zushi on the big screen, to see all this unraveling and walking away going, I did not expect that from a sword and sorcery movie. I didn't expect that at all. And it's just one of those things that I will hype. I will say, if you have a chance, check this flick out, because bottom line, it's just fun. Period. That's it.
Awesome. Awesome. Jeff, final thoughts.
I'll tell you, this clearly inspired later films. I'm not sure if Beastmaster was after that. It feels like it was. Whereas like Conan the Barbarian from Millis gave us a very high concept sword and sorcery fantasy. This gave us a lot more of the pulp action, swashbuckling, swaggering kind of feel. And I'm glad it was, because it did influence a lot of movies that would come after. And there's a little tag at the end that says, like, Talon will return in Tales of an Ancient Empire. Now, it took him a long time to get there, but this film does exist. It was done in 2010. And even though Lee Horsley is not the main star, he does reappear as Talon. This time the movie stars Kevin Sorbo and Michael Pare. So if you're interested in seeing the rest of this particular story, there's that. But this story has been a fan of mine since my early teens, maybe even slightly pre-teens. I'm trying to figure how old I was in 82. 87's 18, so 13 years old. And this film has stuck with me. Even after all of these decades, I still remember lines like, Talon rushing in, and, he's like, I don't have a quarrel with you. It's like, Cromwell's mine. Now we have a quarrel. It's still quotable after all of these decades. There's still so much of this that sticks with you. It made such a great impression on me. And even though I probably haven't watched this film in about 20 years, watching it was still as enjoyable now as it was back then, just because I have a gigantic video library that it takes me forever to get around to watching something or in the mood. It just holds up because it's just that entertaining. And I will never be able to say enough about how much I enjoy the works of this particular director. Everybody out there, check out his catalog. This is where he started, and it made a gigantic impact. See where he's gone through the course of his career, and you won't be disappointed.
Absolutely. And I'll just reiterate that this is a movie that's about having fun, first and foremost. Watch it, enjoy it, and take it, all of the good stuff, and just enjoy being transported somewhere else for 90-something minutes.
Yeah.
That's what this is about. And sometimes that is perfectly acceptable. In fact, it's not only acceptable, it's optimal, because you need that. And that's what fantasy can be a lot of the times. So, yeah,
escapism is the goal of this sort of entertainment.
Yep.
This isn't Chaucer. This is a comic book, and enjoy it like you're enjoying a comic book.
And and so for the next 3 weeks, leading up to October, which will be our Halloween movie madness, we're going to be doing some more fantasy, we're going to bring you some fantasy that's going to, excite you. That is escapism as well, though. It's good enjoyment. And so I am going to announce I have made executive decision on what the next 3 movies will be. So next week we will be doing Dragon Slayer, which was from around the same time. Movie that I very much enjoy. But then we're going to go back old school. We're going to go back to where a lot of these movies kind of got their start from. We're going to go back and we're going to review The Golden Voyage of Sinbad. We're going to look at that movie. We're really looking forward to that. And
wonderful.
Then we're going to
Tom Baker, the Fourth Doctor, plays a great villain.
And then we're going to go fast forward a little bit in time from there, a little bit from this movie, and we're going to look at George Lucas's entrance into fantasy.
Oh, Willow, yes.
We're going to talk about Willow and break that movie down and see how he did that and how he did some world building. So that's what we're going to do for the next 3 weeks. So what do you guys think about that?
I love it. I love your choices, man. Love it.
Good to go. Good to go.
Cool. All right. So with that said, I want to thank my co-host. Thank you so much, Lance.
Thank you very much.
Awesome. And Jeff, I want to thank you.
Hey, man, I was so excited to see this. Like I said, this is one of my favorite movies, and I can't wait to get to the rest of the movies in this particular genre, man. They're all tremendous picks.
Absolutely. And like we said, if you haven't seen this, go check it out. With all the movies that we talk about, go check those out. Come up with your own opinions. We'd love to hear about them, or just watch them for your own enjoyment and see what you think. Mm-hmm. But these are movies that, probably Willow hasn't been lost to time, but some of these movies, have been lost to modern audiences. And that is our whole goal here, to bring them out as well. And with Willow, I think they're planning on doing something with Willow in the future. This will give you a base to look at that and compare, so we'll see what's going on with that. But that's going to be at the end of the month. Our next movie will be Dragon Slayer, but that is for next week. So on behalf of my co-host and myself, I want to thank you so much for watching Cinema Crusaders. We appreciate all your time. Like and subscribe down below for the Comic Crusaders YouTube channel, and watch all our other shows. We've got a variety of different shows on here and United Undercover Capes Podcast Network. Until next week, we'll say goodbye and happy viewing to all of you out there from Cinema Crusaders.